Hello, I'm Brooks Raiford, CEO of NC Tech, and welcome to this briefing on the release of our quarterly leadership poll. In the early months of COVID during the spring and summer of 2020, we did some polling to take the pulse of leaders in the tech sector about how COVID was impacting their organizations and get a sense of their expectations for the near term. The results proved of great interest to our members and to the media, and so starting in 2022, we launched a quarterly poll that asks some consistent questions about general business sentiment, like on hiring, growth, and so forth, as well as some questions that might rotate in or out based on current events or issues. The third quarterly poll for 2023 was conducted within the last week, and we're releasing those results today. You'll find this on our website at nctech.org/pulse. We polled nearly 400 people and had a 36% response rate. The respondents are members of our NC Tech Board of Directors, Board of Advisors, tech CEOs of North Carolina companies, and leaders of large tech hubs or sites in North Carolina, but that may not be headquartered here. Our sponsoring partner from the inception of these polls has been the Stearns Financial Group. Their founder, Dennis Stearns, easy for me to say, serves on the NC Tech Board of Advisors and joins me today. Welcome, Dennis.
Thank you, Brooks. Looks like another really interesting quarterly poll with some things we expected and perhaps a few things we didn't expect.
Indeed, I'll walk through those and highlight some of those areas where we have seen some shifts in sentiment or activities from the most recent quarter and really all the quarters for this year. It's interesting to see those trends and how things change over time. So we'll get right into it. If you'll bring up the first slide. So the first few questions are just demographics on who's answering the poll, just to give you a flavor of the respondents here. Which range best depicts the number of North Carolina-based employees in your organization? You can see that there's a fairly even distribution, generally speaking, among the sizes. Our organization is predominantly small and mid-sized companies as members. Respondents of the poll may skew a little bit on the larger side. And you can see that reflected here. Next slide. This is very consistent quarter to quarter. About 2/3 of our respondents work for organizations that are headquartered in North Carolina. Next. We also ask what the person's role is in the organization. You can see that, as is typical, C-suite is far and away the highest percentage of respondents. Other categories stair-step it down from there. There often is some shifting within these 4 or 5 additional categories, but not significant. Next slide. All right, so the first sentiment question is, how do you perceive the past quarter has been for North Carolina's tech sector broadly? So again, we're asking about the respondents' view of the past quarter for the sector, not necessarily their own business. That's the next question. So fortunately, terrible is a very small percentage, as it normally is. Slightly disappointing at 12%, okay around 33%, good 47%, and great 6.25% or 6.5%. In terms of what's happened over the last 3 quarters, there's been fairly consistent. The terrible has always been 1% to 2%. Disappointing has been exactly the same, 12% all 3 quarters. Okay has shrunk from 42% in the first quarter down to 33% here, but that's because the shift has gone to good. Good has gone up 7 points since the first quarter, from 40% to 47%. And great, this actually is a tick up. It was 5% in the first quarter, close to 5% in the second, and now 6.5%. So the shift here has been toward the positive. And again, this is about the sector broadly. Dennis, did you have any observations there?
Yeah, the general observation is that what we're seeing with a lot of the companies we work with and with some of the ones we've been interviewing for my upcoming Ninja Entrepreneur book is that things have been trending better. So that's been reflected in this, that we have less okay and more good. So that's a good directional trend.
It is, indeed. Okay, next slide. Now, here we ask about the respondent's own organization, about which they obviously have more knowledge than they do about maybe the broader community. Terrible, still fairly low, slightly disappointing, 15. Okay, about 21. Good, 44. Great, 17. So interesting that the perception of the sector was about 6.5% great, but for their own organization, almost 3 times that. So that's encouraging. The trends there are terrible has gone from 1% in the first quarter to 3.6 here. So percentage-wise, that's a large growth, but not really in relative terms to the overall pie chart. Disappointing has held pretty steady. It's ranged between 15 and 17%. Okay has ticked down a bit. It was 25% first quarter, 21% here. But again, good got some benefit. Good has gone from 38% in the first quarter to 44% here. And great has actually hovered here. 17 to 19% has been the response on their own organization. This always happens, Dennis. People seem to be a little more positive about their own organization. I think that because perhaps it's media, perhaps it's the headlines about layoffs that you see sprinkled in with other good news around jobs and other things that gives people a slightly less optimistic perception or positive perception about the sector than what they've experienced themselves.
Yeah, absolutely. And, kind of an interesting piece on this for the next quarter or two, because of the companies that were battening down the hatches because of a potential recession. Some of those are now releasing money for capital expenditures, specifically in tech. So that's another hopeful tailwind for the next couple of quarters of what we're seeing here.
Okay. Next slide, please. So now we're looking ahead. We're asking here about people's individual businesses and organizations. I expect that over the next quarter, our business will decline, stay the same, or grow. You can see the distribution here. Decline again, very small, so pessimism remains small here. About a third staying holding steady, and about 2/3 saying grow. If you look at the trend line for this slide over the 3 quarters, decline has held a bit steady. This actually, sort of 5 or 6% has been typical. Stay the same has been remarkably similar. 32 or 33% has been the answer there every quarter. And then grow, again, has been right at 62 to 63% across the board. So there's a very steady perspective or perception about what the next quarter, whenever that has been this year, will mean for everybody's organizations. Okay, next slide. We always ask a hiring question. So we ask, are you reducing headcount, not hiring, or holding steady, or hiring? We've always seen in the tech sector a bit higher, more positive response here than perhaps in the broader economy. But when you look at the trend lines here across the 3 quarters so far, cutting has hovered in 2 to 4% range, so that's remained fairly stable. Holding even has grown a bit from 28% in the first quarter of the year to 34% now. And then still hiring has been what took the hit that went to not hiring, but only, again, about 5 points difference. 67% were still hiring in the first quarter, 62% now. Because it's just a few points difference, I don't consider that to be terribly material. It's not a giant sample anyway, so depending on who responded could be the result of this versus actual shift in overall sentiment. So fairly stable, and I think the headline here is there's still hiring going on, and so that's good to hear. And remember that our association is made up of people, of organizations of all types, not just tech companies, and so there's a mix of respondents in this poll that may not be leading a tech company, but of course they hire tech talent all the time. Every organization does. And so this may be a bit broader in the economy than just tech might be. So that's encouraging. Dennis, any thoughts here?
Yeah, the the hiring cycle. The labor market is still tight, and
Right.
and so we had tremendous debates at the NC Tech summer retreat in Pinehurst. over what the future of hiring was going to look like, how much of it would be virtual, hybrid, back in the office. And we thought we had those debates behind us, but apparently not, because we had CEOs on both sides of the topic planting flags. I will mention in the upcoming NC Tech newsletter, there will be a piece about a workshop we're putting on in a couple of weeks on better hiring, better retention. And we have one of the national experts on that who's coming in to help out with that, Chris Zarnick.
That's right. If you are on the distribution list for NC Tech's monthly e-newsletter, that comes out on Monday, and you'll see a reference to that in our partner events section. Okay, next slide. So one of the questions in the poll asks respondents to suggest a question for a future poll. Last month was the first month that we included one that came from the studio audience, so to speak. And it was about, do you think there will be a recession this year? And it was fairly evenly divided as between yes, no, and I have no idea. So this quarter's poll, there were a lot of requests that we asked about AI. So a fairly general one. Everybody's talking about it. Not everybody's doing it. Not everybody is quite sure what to do with it. So where is your organization on implementing AI? Not yet, 17%. Starting slow, about half. But a third, significant use. That surprised me because not all companies are huge and have entire departments dedicated to this or have consultants who can help them do this. To have a full third at what I consider to be a very early stage still, and the ability to wrap your head around AI and what it can do and its use cases and so forth, I think that's pretty remarkable. And of course, when you have 84% saying they've started, at least, if not fully engaged, I think that's pretty remarkable. What are you seeing and hearing, Dennis?
It is remarkable. And we, in the Ninja Entrepreneur research, we've interviewed over 100 companies. The top 10, the ninjas in the entrepreneur private business world, all of them have completed at least one major AI project successfully. And they've had a few others that were maybe marginally successful, or they nixed. But what is really interesting is that out of those top 10 companies, of all the ideas that were generated by employees and others in the organization, less than 20% actually were looked at deeper. So meaning over 80% went into the circular file. And so I think that's going to be a trend for the future, is there's going to be a lot of potential ideas. How many of them actually get implemented remains to be seen.
Right. It's a brave new world. Okay. Let's see if do we have one more slide? Oh, yes, 2 more slides. We do ask a couple of open-ended questions. One is, what makes you optimistic about the next 12 months? And the key, the themes or terms that showed up most had to do with feeling good about the economy and growth in general, inflation and interest rates improving, low unemployment continuing to be the norm. Demand for services came up quite a few times, as well as public funding and investment. That seems to be heavy in the broadband infrastructure arena in particular. And let's go to the next slide, which is what makes you pessimistic, or what concerns you about the next 12 months. And this always happens. Some of the same terms apply. Others feel worried about inflation or the economy or interest rates. Supply chain shows up here. We talked about AI. I think obviously people are cautious or curious about it, maybe even concerned about it. Still some recessionary concerns. We're clearly getting into heavy political season over the next year, so that came up, and it has come up in the last few polls.
So I think it's interesting that in the previous slide about things that make you optimistic, AI growth was one of the biggest items.
Right.
And artificial intelligence shows up on this screen as less of a concern. But I did see some headline recently about will AI be the last major human project that's accomplished? Obviously, a little bit of a gloomster there. We do have I'll mention on October 26th, NC Tech is doing a seminar, The Humans Are Still Here. So would encourage you all to sign up for that NC Tech webinar.
Thanks for that plug. Yes, the headline is "The Humans Are Still Here. Is there still room for us in an AI-generated future?" So you'll see that on our website event page, nctech.org/events. And that may have been our last content slide. Alex, if you'll move us. Yep. So as I said at the beginning, nctech.org/pulse has the archives of previous polls and some other information. This recording and the slide deck that you've been watching will be posted there as soon as production is completed. We will be doing a final quarterly poll late in Q4, so be on the lookout for that. Dennis, thank you very much for the support of your firm, and a reminder that you can find this and much more at our website, nctech.org. We encourage you to poke around there and engage with us in all the ways that we have to offer. So for now, thanks for viewing, and we'll see you next time.